The chapter begins with a question. Is there a future? This question, is there a future, is a question about the being or existence of a mode of time, of that which is yet to come. Is there a future? Is that which is yet to come, does it exist? Is it? Is it in being? Is there a future? It would seem that the present exists with some certainty. We are here now. Me recording these lectures, you watching them, my present, your present, seems like it's existing with some certainty. Your current perceptions are indexed to the present mode of time. Whatever you're seeing, hearing, feeling, it's all happening now. The past can be verified as far as the past goes to a certain extent by the historical record. So I spoke on a previous occasion, for instance, in the previous session, and there's a recording of that you can look at to confirm for yourself. So the present has this sense of being very much immediately in existence. And the past has the sense that even though it's past, you can confirm it's having existed. Now, of course, the past might be forged or misunderstood. For example, there might be a deep fake video showing that last week I was doing something else. So the being of the past is questionable, but more questionable still, Dugin says, is the being of the future. The future just lacks being, as he puts it, when compared to the past and the present. So if we were to leave it here, the response to the question, is there a future, would be entirely uncertain. By the time the open future is realized and made concrete, it's no longer the future, but the present quickly fading into the past. So what then is the status of the future? Again, we ask, is there a future? To approach this question, Dugin says that we can begin by undermining what we initially granted as our confidence in the being of the present. Just because we're experiencing a present doesn't mean that the present exists or is in being. We may be compelled, as a matter of practical convenience, to treat what is present to us as though it exists objectively. But objective existence is not given in the experience itself, and it's not accessible to pure theoretical reason as opposed to practical reason. Dugin is drawing on some philosophical notions here, but what he's saying is that the objectivity of the objective, the reality of the real, the existence of what you're experiencing now, that is not given in the experience itself. We treat it as though it's real for practical purposes, but theoretically, its reality, or here, its objective existence, is not given with the experience itself in the same way that, for example, its color or its shape or some other feature of it is given to you in the experience itself. So from this perspective, past, present, and future no longer stand in the hierarchical relationship in which the present most is, it is the most, it's the most existent of the modes of time. The past is next in order of existence, because again, it can be falsified, it can be doubted, but still there's some record of it, it's more solidified. And the future is least of all. We had that hierarchy, but here we begin to undermine it. And in fact, we no longer have this gradation of degrees of being. Rather, Dugin writes, the past and the future acquire equal consideration with the present. Specifically by analyzing the extent to which the mode of time is not given by the object, but is added by us, the subject, we can begin to approach the idea that time is subjective, that it is, as he puts it, the transcendental subject that installs time in the perception of the object. Let me just pause here briefly and say this shift of our focus or reorientation towards what is given in experience and how is it given characterizes above all the phenomenological method. And as we're going to see in a minute, that's really the philosophical method or school of thought or approach that Dugin is going to be zeroing in on here in the next part of the chapter. So in fact, he turns to one of the founding fathers of phenomenology as a school, Edmund Husserl. Edmund Husserl had examined what he called the phenomenology of internal time consciousness, the experience of our experience of time. And he has the book by that title, Phenomenology of Internal Time Consciousness. And it's to Husserl that Dugin turns here for his discussion of that complex topic, using Husserl's analysis of music and melody as his starting point. What, we ask, does the experience of listening to a piece of music tell us about the consciousness of time? And how in the world could that be related to any issue of practical political significance? Well, let's leave the politics aside for now and focus on the first part of the question. What does the experience of music teach us about the phenomenology of internal time consciousness? So you hear a piece of music. What are you hearing at any given moment? An individual note sounding in the present. At the same time, though, you hear the past notes that are dissolving little by little into nothingness. Their resonance persists in the consciousness. So I ask you, imagine the first few notes of any song you like. By the time you come to the last note in the sequence, you're hearing not only that note in the present, but the resonance of the previous notes, to say nothing yet of the anticipation or memory of the notes to come. So you have this retention, you also have anticipation. All of that is there in the experience of listening to music, even though it's only a note sounding in the present. So as Dugin puts it, with an emphasis on this resonance of the previous notes, he says the past is present in the present. The present thus becomes continuous and includes the past as vanishing presence. Now, what's true in this case of music, Dugin argues, that the past is present in the present, is, quote, the methodological key for the understanding of history. History is thus the awareness of the past in the present, as he writes on page 157. And just as you heard the melody internally when I asked you to imagine the first few notes of the song, assuming you do, there you go, you hear it internally, so too do vanishing events sound in the act of recalling them, as Dugin writes. So now I hope you're ready for what we're about to discuss. Husserl's analysis of the temporal dimension of our inner experience indicates that time is rooted in consciousness itself, page 158. At a fundamental level, consciousness, Dugin writes, perceives itself. And this self-reference of consciousness is the ultimate experience of the last source of reality, in his words. So I just want to give you a heads up that we're entering into some difficult territory here. We're moving from the phenomenology of internal time consciousness as experienced in music, with the past, present, and future, the anticipation, the resonance, and even the duration, to a deeper dimension of consciousness's self-reference. Get ready. What Dugin writes here is that consciousness's self-reference gives rise to a short circuit that causes logical and temporal dualities to appear. The creation of time. Now, we haven't really talked that much earlier in the book about the creation of time. We've said some things about rooting it in Dasein, some reference to Heideggerian phenomenology. But here we have the idea that the creation of time is the attempt to stop the trauma of the short circuit of self-referential pure consciousness. Let me say that again. The creation of time is the attempt to stop the trauma of this short circuit of self-referential pure consciousness. Let's try to follow out the reasoning here and the implications. Time, Dugin writes, is rooted in the evasion of the perception of the pain, of the void, whereby consciousness becomes aware of itself. Okay, again, consciousness becomes aware of itself in a void. There is pain in that perception, and time is constituted by the evasion of that pain, or by the attempt to evade the pain of consciousness's traumatic short-circuiting when it cycles back on itself. Very strange idea, but I'm telling you, it's worth the effort here. So remember that Dugin opposes the liberal end of history and postmodern post-history. So now we combine this phenomenological reflection with his political thoughts on the end of history and on postmodern post-history. Does he want history to resume?